The biggest battle we will ever have to face is the battle between you and you. It's the battle of taking your mind to that limit and then breaking through. On the Mindful Experiment podcast, we will share concepts, universal laws, and interviewing individuals who have done just that, who have gone through the dark times and through those moments allowed their light to shine bright. I'm your host, Dr. Vic Manzo, and I want to thank you for listening to the podcast and taking this journey with me as we discover different avenues to break through those limits, expand your reality, and evolve into the person you desire to be. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Dr. Vic, and as always, before we jump into another interview, I want to share a little bit about this amazing person that I've gotten to know in the last 6 to 8 weeks. Her heart is so big. Her vision is so big of what she wants to do. And I've been so awe-inspired by this that I was like, I got to get her on my podcast. I got to get her here, share her heart, share what she's up to, share her story that is so transformative, that it inspired me in so many ways. And it's just a blessing to have her on. Courtney Andersen is who I had the opportunity to interview. And she is a sober coach, health and fitness coach, and she's the founder of Sober Vibes and Real Aligned Women. Both are an online support community for recovery and sober, curious women of all ages. She's a wife, a cat mom to her little fur pants, Fiona, and she's a lover of all Bravo shows, personal development, being in the flow, fall time in Pure, Michigan, travel, the F word. Let me tell you, yes, I've heard her say the F word, sweet treats, being kind and laughing every single chance she gets. It's one cool thing about her is, there's so many. My favorite day of my life is August 18th, as she states, 2012, because that is the day I finally stopped the madness of addiction and started to do some real living. So this podcast, we get into some tears. She almost got me teary. She got me teary at the end. All right, I'll admit, I got a little teary-eyed at the end. But she gets teary-eyed and she shares some just awesome stuff, man. It's just, I was so happy to have her on. And, enough of the cliffhangers here, enough of the anticipation that I'm trying to create. Let's go ahead and let's jump into this amazing interview that I had the opportunity to with Courtney Andersen. So Courtney, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Vic. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited with a little touch of nervousness.
I love it. That means it's going to be a good one. I mean, I was excited to have you on. I've been keeping an eye on what you've been up to, and I was like, I got to get her on the show eventually. You have so much, you're up to so much. You're doing, the Sober Vibes. You got your podcast you just came out with, Real Aligned Women, right?
Yes.
And you got programs that you do, and I just love what you're up to, the energy you're bringing to this world. And I was like, I got to get her out here and showcase this. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for asking me. It's an honor to be here.
So like any journey or story, we all have a story, as I always say. And I'm kind of curious to know, like, how did your journey start? We'll start. How did your journey start to get to where we are today?
So my journey started it was my final rock bottom. And previous to that rock bottom, I had, 999 rock bottoms, but this is the one that really stuck with me. So I had woken up on a Saturday morning. The night before was my last shift at the bar I had worked at for years upon years. And of course, I got completely shit-faced. I know I can swear on this, so I'm not even going to ask you.
Perfect. I love being real, so just bring it.
Yeah. So I got completely shit-faced the night before, went into a blackout. My boyfriend at the time was like, please don't start doing shots. And I just want to say for the record, I worked up to a couple hours and then somebody took over for me because we knew it was my last night. So I don't want people to think like, oh my God, were you still on the clock doing all this? So it was a big party. I ended up getting completely shit-faced. The next morning, I wake up. One of my best friends who stayed the night with me that night says to me, Court, Fiona's missing. And I was like, nah, she's fine. And Fiona is my cat. And then she was like, and Matt's not too happy. And I was like, okay. So instantly I had that bad feeling that I had had so many times before, where it was instant like, okay, I know this feeling last night didn't go well. Come to find out, I was in my blackout. I went out to smoke a cigarette and I left the sliding glass door open. So Fiona escaped. Now, this was the second time I lost her in a blackout. And it gets me emotional talking about it because it's still, because that cat saved my life. That cat and Matt saved my life in that sense. So fast forward, Matt comes downstairs. The look on his face says it all. And that day he had told me, he was like, you can continue drinking, but I'm not going to stick around for it. Because at that point, him and I were together for a year and a half and living together for about a year at that point. He was like, the cat's missing. Something has got to change. If you don't want to change, I'm going to leave and you can continue on with your life. So at that point, that's when I really had to sit down and reevaluate my life and reevaluate the relationship I had with alcohol, because it continuously brought me to this place. So I made a promise to the universe that if I had found Fiona, that I would give life without alcohol a shot. 3 days later, I found her. I found that little precious fur pants, and I've been sober ever since August 18th of 2012.
That is awesome. Power to you.
Yes. Thank you very much.
I know it takes a lot to do that. I mean, was it kind of just that light switch and it was done and that was it? I mean, obviously from what you just said, yes, but
it was that light switch moment, Dr. Vic, but also too, I had known I had a problem with alcohol since I was 24, 23 years old. I mean, at 25, my soul was talking to me where it was just like, if you want the life you want, this has got to go. But it took me a while to get there to where I finally said enough was enough and completely not drink at all. Because for many years, I had tried to moderate my drinking. I had tried to, I won't do shots. I'll just drink beer. Or I'm just going to drink wine. I won't have any hard alcohol. I'm only going to drink on Fridays. But at the end of the day, alcohol in me it just doesn't work. I mean, I'm allergic. I'm allergic to, my brain is allergic to alcohol. I'm not the type of person who can have one and be done. After that first couple sips, I could legit feel the switch in my brain, be like, okay, let's keep going. There was no off switch.
Interesting. And I love how you said about moderate drinking, because sometimes people will try to, I don't want to say dumb it down. And I know you have more expertise than I do on this, but from my perspective, but they'll be like, okay, I'm going to drink less. And usually doesn't work for the most part. Would you say? No, I don't, because and that's how at the end of my drinking history, at the end of my drinking career, and that's something that I talk about a lot. I wasn't an everyday drinker. And I think there's this whole big thing of alcoholism where people think you have to drink every day to be an alcoholic, and you don't. So when my whole thing was, when I was only drinking once a week, every time that once a week I would drink to black out. It wasn't how many days I was drinking. It was when alcohol hit my lips. There was an issue. So you can try moderate drinking, but it's going to lead you back to where it's going to lead you in that vicious cycle, where if you have a problem with alcohol, you can't control it. There's no control. Gotcha. And when you stopped cold turkey, was there anything that did you ever have an urge to ever want to it come back and maybe I could go for a nice, I don't know, glass of wine or something like that?
Yes. I'm glad you asked this question, because there has been many times up in my recovery where, especially those first 2 years, you go through a grieving process. And at a point after, I think maybe it was like 90 days, that 90 days to about 6 months, I really was like, oh, why can't I just drink normal? And then after a year, I really thought to myself, I was like, well, maybe I can just have a couple drinks and it would be fine. So you're always going to try to reason for yourself to have that one thing. It's like same thing with treating yourself too. When some people don't have control over food, it's like, oh, I'm going to treat myself to that piece of cake, and that piece of cake can lead down the rabbit hole.
Oh, I totally know what you mean. I'm with you on that.
So yes, to answer your questions, periodically through my recovery, I have had thoughts in my head of maybe I can drink normally, but the answer is no.
And it's funny how the mind will play games with you and try to rationalize and give you situations of, well, maybe just this or maybe just that along the way. So kudos to you on that. It takes a lot of power to make that change. And I also commend you too, because you're like, honestly, when people think of alcoholism, at least I know for me back in the day, I was like someone who drinks every single day, needs to have the bottle every single day with them or whatever their choice is. And you brought it up where it was more of a once a week type of thing.
Right. Because and that was the thing. I was a binge drinker. So it wasn't, early on in my drinking, like I fell in love with drinking at 19. So I didn't drink a lot in high school. As soon as I turned 19, and I live in the Detroit metro area, and Canada is 30 minutes away. So the drinking age in Canada is 19. So when we used to go to Canada when I turned 19, I fell in love with it. Fell in love with that atmosphere. So yes, you don't have to drink every day. So if you looked at the timeline of my drinking, it was like every day and then slowed down to just once a week. Mm-hmm. And then drinking like that, blacking out. That's not good.
No, that's not good at all. I agree with you there. Why do you think then, because like I think there was a stat I read a couple, maybe last year, and it was talking about like the number one consumed beverage in America, and it wasn't water, which was shocking. It was actually beer. Why do you think it is that we tend to drink, or we go to drinking as a norm in society?
Because it's socially acceptable. And I get questions all the time of why I do not drink. Would you ever ask a person, why do you not do cocaine?
I love it.
But seriously, why aren't you doing heroin?
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're not shooting up heroin in your arms, or, oh, you're not smoking crack, but it's an automatic, like because now I'm so comfortable within myself and in my recovery. So when people are like, oh, you don't drink, I'm like, no, straight. And I just tell them off the bat. But early on, it was like the looks people gave you. And it's just like, it was like it's this look in their eye and then they followed up, well, what do you do for fun? It's twisted. It is so, because that is how we've been programmed from very early on. The commercials of beer, alcohol, all the celebrities who endorse cocktails, like it's so in our face and we are so numb to it.
It's so true. When I was in high school, and unfortunately, it's still an issue today, but drinking back then in high school was something of the thing to do. And thankfully I didn't do it, but it was one of those things where I remember my cousin and we would go out to clubs to dance. We loved dancing. And people would think we were drunk because we would be on the dance floor the whole night, never stop. And we just had a blast. And they're like, you're not drinking. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. And we're like, no, you don't need that. And this is high school. I love when you brought up the programming side, because we used to be like, no, we're going to teach people how to have fun without it because you don't need it.
Right.
And so, but it's funny how it is socially. It's programmed in us to, that's something you do. Like when it comes to a celebration, what's the first thing that people think of?
Champagne, cocktails.
Right? Exactly. And it's one of those things where, well, why do we have to have it? Is there other things that we can do? Or why do we even have to do anything? Why can't we just enjoy the moment?
Exactly.
So I know we see eye to eye on this one, but it's just fascinating to, especially for me too, just to see, like, because I don't drink much at all, maybe 6 times a year, if that. Every once in a blue moon, a Scotch will call me, and I'll be like, okay, I think it's been a while, I can have one. But other than that, it's like when we go out, friends will do the same thing. Like, you don't drink? And when they know me, they're like, oh, you do it for health reasons. Well, I do it for health reasons, but sometimes it's not a preference. So I'm assuming you get asked that all the time about when it comes to why you don't drink.
Exactly. And again, in early recovery, and I think it's different for me because I'm so open with it on social media and the stuff that I'm doing. So like people see it of why, and I explain it of why I'm drinking, but definitely because I didn't start really recovering out loud until I was between that 30-60 day mark of my own recovery. So I just feel in the early stages, those first couple of years, it was like people were just floored, or you would get the people who say to you, which this is really why you have to be careful of your word. To people, especially early in recovery, and they'll say to you, oh, you'll be back to drinking. Or when is this going to stop? Like, it's wild, Dr. Vic, the stuff that people say to you, and you're just like, oh my God.
I hear you on that one. I totally do. Is it sometimes you hear that also from your closest people to you?
Yes. I mean, I've definitely had some close people around me say some of that stuff, but in all honesty, looking back now, I took it personal, but looking back now, it's an insecurity they have with themselves, or the insecurity they have with the relationship of alcohol they have. Gotcha. That is not, I don't want people to take that as a judgmental statement, because it's not a judgmental statement. It's just the facts of the reality.
No, of course. No, I totally get it. I mean, it's all, it's what people do is they, their fear, they'll put it upon you and project it towards you. And, or I don't know, I can go in so many directions with that, but it's one of those things where, they want it, but then they don't want, it's their insecurity, as you said. They're insecure about what they're doing.
And I've had people say to me, I wish you were still drinking. It's like, okay, well then fuck you. Like, because at the end of the day, me drinking, if I choose to drink, I'm choosing death. That is where my drinking was leading me. And I could have been at death's door. I was at death's door for 10 years. I mean, to drink till you're blackout. I've woken up in jail before. I've woken up in hospitals before. You just think about it. Being that hammered, falling and hitting your head could have killed me.
Totally. And
so it's just like, it's for me, it's recovery is choosing life.
I love that. I love how you say that. I think it's huge because from a health perspective, I say drinking is one of the worst things you could ever do for your health. I'm not saying there's other drugs out there. Other things are out there that are a little bit more on the damaging side, but it's one of the things I look at it, and just seeing from a neurological perspective what it does to the body is just mind blowing. And how much Americans drink with it on top of it. It's like, it's amazing what the body can do. That's all I can say.
Right. The human body is a powerful thing. And what people don't even, what you're doing to your organs with the drinking. Like, it's poison.
Yeah. And do you think there's an emotional side to drinking in a sense, from your experience or from the work you do, noticing with others that you work with, how much is associated with emotional stuff?
Oh, 100%. When I started drinking and I got that first taste, fell in love with that, it made me feel like I was, I don't want to say on top of the world. I don't want to quote the Titanic, but it made me feel powerful. It put on this blanket for me where I'm like, okay, because when you look back at your childhood, and I know I've talked to you about this before, about like the introvert extrovert, looking back on my childhood and getting the clarity that I have in recovery, I'm like, I was kind of an introvert, like I'm an introvert extrovert person. But at the end of the day, I was always kind of shy And so when I got that taste of alcohol and how it made me feel, that definitely was, it helped me. It kind of helped me step out of my comfort zone in that way. But it also, too, made me forget my own trauma that I had in my childhood and growing up.
And that's the fascinating thing I see about alcohol, because it gives you that sense of, and I'm an introvert myself. And so when I used to play, when I played rugby for Arizona State for a year, and one of the things about rugby is drinking. It's just part of the game in a sense. And since I never played before, I was like, okay, I'll just go with the flow on this. And it was funny how friends of mine used to be like, I like when you're drunk, which I didn't really get drunk much, but I was like, wait a minute here. How do you like me when I'm drunk? What does that mean about when I'm a normal, when I don't have anything in my system?
Right.
But it's one of those things. But the other side of the coin of that then is you feel that power, but then like you just said, there's the other side that comes up. That was, in my opinion, I always say is like we're trying to suppress it in a sense. And it actually I don't want to say it makes it worse, but it's kind of like that in a sense, where it's like, yes, I feel great. And then here comes the flip. And now here's the real stuff.
Right. So then in that sense of, and then I started creating habit after habit, and my habit and hobby became drinking. And that is what my world became. So how I then dealt with everything, I had cocktails with it, whether it was a good day, bad day, Christmas, Labor Day, whatever day it was drinking. So I then formed this unhealthy relationship with alcohol.
Gotcha.
Uh-huh.
And going along those lines then with that, how did, because you always hear that alcohol destroys not just your health in your body, but also destroys relationships and so forth down that path too. Your experience or other people's experiences, have you noticed that at all with that kind of a concept?
Yes. And it didn't take me until I was that first year of recovery. I didn't see it, how my own actions, not even when I was drinking. So then I had to, and then there was, drinking, then the day before being hungover, canceling on everything, canceling on people because all I could do was lay on my couch and dry heave. And so then it showed me being sober, like, okay, my actions, even though I always said in my active addiction, I'm not hurting anybody, but that's the biggest crack of shit that you could ever tell yourself. That is such a lie, because my actions alone of just me taking a sip of alcohol, there was a whole ripple effect of what it would do to people, to everybody around me. And I see it a lot. And this is the one thing, because I work with a lot of women who are in recovery or active addiction. And a lot of women say they don't think that their kids know that they have a drinking problem. And I call bullshit on all of that, because kids are very, very smart and very intuitive little human beings. And they know you might be doing closet drinking where you're not taking a sip of the bottle, but your actions are different. Your energy is different, so you're not fooling anybody. You're not fooling anybody. And I think that that's the delusion people who are sick create for themselves.
No, so true. And working with a lot of kids, I always teach moms about how they're sponges for energy and they can read everything. Yeah. Even though they can't articulate it, they can't explain it in words, they know intuitively what's going on.
Yeah, because it is the person, there's just a shift. And Matt, who is now my husband, the boyfriend who told me, didn't tell me, but he gave me a choice. And he's now my husband.
Love it.
But he always said, because I would used to come home and he would ask me, he was like, he would ask me, because he knew it was a problem, like, how many drinks did you have? And you know what I always told him? I would always tell him I had 2 to 3 beers, which was a lie. I probably had about 10 shots, but he could always tell, because he said that my right eye would always kind of go wonky, like he could tell in my eyes. So if that's just, nobody's fool. You can't fool somebody. You just can't.
You can't. People pick up on it. It's so true. What got you to, from all this and everything, what inspired you to work with women? Was it just, it was just like you wanted to? Was there a calling, or you saw something in a problem or something and you're like, I need to create a solution to this?
Kind of all of the above. So since I was little, I've always wanted to help people. I just didn't know in what. I just didn't know how I would do it. So when I got to the point of, it was, like 2.5 years into my recovery, almost 3. I was working in the medical field. I was a medical assistant. Now, this was a choice I made in active addiction to start pursuing my career in the medical field, because eventually I wanted to be a nurse. So I did my medical assistant. I got my foot in the door. I worked at a pain clinic for 6 years. So then I started to recover during that process. And then I woke up to the whole epidemic with prescription drugs. That's a whole topic for another day. And I saw the medical field and was in it. It was a very negative environment for me. And seeing people become, seeing this shift in people, it just wasn't right. So I went. Oprah had a Life You Want tour that came into Detroit, and I went. It was a 2-day event with her. And that is when I started being like, because she talked about living your best life and, had exceptional speakers there. And that's when it clicked to me. I was like, I need something more. I cannot work in this 9 to 5. I don't want this. So then after that weekend, I then start reading The Secret. And then a couple months later, the Beachbody coaching opportunity came into my life because I wanted to lose 10 pounds for my upcoming wedding. Then I get into the Beachbody coaching. That provided me, in the past couple of years, such an awesome platform to do my coaching. I left that 9 to 5 terrible job. And then I went back to bartending and waiting tables. And I know a lot of people are like, I don't know how you can do that when you drink, but I went back there too, because it gave me the freedom in my schedule. But I also didn't want to fear alcohol, because as I said earlier, alcohol is all around. It's never going anywhere. So I didn't want to continue to fear it. So I faced it.
Love it.
So that then it's given me, going into this coaching with my health and fitness coaching business, then that has given me my other business of recovery sober coaching, and the need for what I saw, because I have participated in support groups, and I will never bash support groups, but eventually it just didn't align with me and how I thought that there are other ways to recover than just support groups. So that is kind of what had opened up the door. And 2, Dr. Vic, if you can share your story with one person and it just helps them, like, I think you've done what you needed to do in your life. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how I feel, that if I can share my story and be open and out loud with somebody else. See, I get emotional. You're making me cry now. An Oprah moment.
I love it.
This is what we've talked about in our 5-week course of seeing your vision come to life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I could just share my story and help some other woman out there being like, you know what, I don't need to keep masking myself and treating myself so poorly with alcohol because I feel worthless. I have done my job,
Yeah. It gives you a higher purpose, a higher sense of why you're here.
Right. So, right. Exactly. So I just saw a need for creating something more and talking about it openly, because alcoholism and addiction to whether it is crack, cocaine, heroin, gambling, sex addiction, food addiction, there's such a shame. And people don't talk about it, or they talk about it. It's so hush hush where it's like, oh, Sally's got a drinking problem. It's the conversation around addiction. It's shameful. It's quiet. It's like, no, people are sick.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's funny how it's so hush hush. I grew up with a a grandfather who used to have a drinking problem, and then he had a gambling problem that was like, I knew something. I knew as I was growing up, something was up. And thankfully, my mom would talk about it with me. But like, if I went to my grandmother and said something, nothing. Nope. Everything's fine. No, it's okay. No, it's okay. Nothing.
Right. And I expect everybody. I respect everybody who wants to be anonymous. I will never take that away from. I would never be like, no, well, you should recover out loud. I respect that. If you don't want to be in this platform, that is fine. But also, too, in support groups, even the anonymous thing, like it's like, well, where's the empowerment of this? So that's kind of where with my whole thing of it's like, let your past empower you of where you are today.
I like that. Mm-hmm. That's good stuff.
Thank you.
Good stuff here. Excuse me. Yeah. So with the whole programs that you do, is there like do you have a systematic process or something you can share, or how you help individuals through things? Is there an awareness process, or what is it that you walk them through in a sense?
Well, each person is different. I have to say that. So it's each person is different. And I think that the one thing that I can say that each person in the process that we do recognizes together, you really have to recognize in what we do together, of the work we do together, is why did you start drinking? Why did this start happening? And it's really I think once you recognize and understand why you started it, that's when the healing and the recovery happens.
Got it. That makes sense.
So, and then it's just more, it's more accountability. It's more giving you tools. It's understanding the grieving process of the old life you once had, because you have to grieve that. You will be sitting there crying I cried for months, Dr. Vic.
I could imagine.
I cried for months because I had to let that shame and guilt out of me for what I did in my active addiction, because I was a shitty person. I was not a good person, and the shit that I did, it wasn't healthy. So you have to release that, and you have to grieve, because you're going to have to grieve your friends too. You're going to lose friends in your recovery, but you gain a lot. You gain new friends who are on the same wavelength with you. So it's a lot that goes into it.
I love it. And it's as the vibration of shame is the lowest human emotion that exists. And one of the things that you said that it's just hitting me right now is talking about how for you drinking is death. And really, if drinking puts you into more shame state, that is death. That literally is.
Yes. And I think too that is, there's high statistics in relapse and recovery. It happens. And I think too, if you don't process that shame and cry it out, journal it out, meditate it out, and process what you are feeling, that is easily triggered into relapse. So that is why too, like in early recovery, you really have to watch what you say to people. Did you see the movie A Star Is Born?
I don't think I did.
Okay. It just came out with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. I don't want to spoil it for you, but when you watch that movie, if you ever do, like, you'll see in this of like what you say to somebody can affect them in a terrible way. But yeah, it's the shame. It's the shame that you really have to let go of and give yourself some grace, because you're on a new path.
Yeah, and the way it wovens into your life, I think the more, like you said, like a dying process has to exist in order for you to shed that old skin and create the anew. Right. And that's the whole, and I use this one all the time. There is beauty in the bottom. Me losing Fiona like that, because there was beauty in that moment. And that's why when I got so emotional talking about it, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here today. Yeah. You have to hit, I always say humans have to they got to go to their hands and knees and get knocked down so hard to their hands and knees where it's all of a sudden they're like, okay, enough's enough. Exactly. And that was just enough's enough. And that
again, was my 999th rock bottom. And it was enough because I was sick and tired of just being sick and tired. It was exhausting.
I hear you on that one. 999 times sounds exhausting to me.
Right.
But no, and again, kudos to you again on making that choice and decision, because addictions. One of my trainings I have is I'm certified in, I should know this off the top of my head, addictions and compulsive behaviors. And it's one of those things that is such an epidemic. I mean, I have one of the teachers that I learned from, he would talk about how compulsive disorders, and he goes, it's not what you think it is. I forgot how he breaks it down so elegantly, but he'll talk about how it is the massive epidemic in America that they're not seeing. And he's like, we're missing the boat. And addictions comes in with that, obviously, because there's compulsions with it. But it's a scary, it's kind of messed up that we don't talk more about it and get it out there and informed.
And that's the other thing too, where there's one addiction, 2 to 3 more will show up. So I also smoke cigarettes I smoked cigarettes for years. I quit that after 6 weeks. I wish I would have waited, baby steps, but whatever. It all happens how it's supposed to happen. But then too, I started in that year, I turned to food, and then I turned to food and shopping at the same time. So it's mindfulness that goes into everything. And it's about compulsion. So, but don't you think too, Dr. Vic, that is all something in the mind that can be, you can rewire your brain? Always.
Mm-hmm. Your brain's always rewiring and it's always learning. So, simple chiropractic, that's a simple chiropractic principle, that the brain is plastic and it's always continually changing and forming and evolving or de-evolving, just depending on what you program it to. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, and I was just going to say, I think too, when you look at it, because that's something that I started looking at too, those first couple of years of recovery, was that it was about building new habits for myself and new hobbies. Like those first 3 months, I sat there in Mod Podge picture frames to keep my mind and my hands busy. So it's like you have to replace, for me, I had to replace the act of drinking with something else and try to do it with something else that was healthier. The food and shopping came in because I wasn't taking care of that emotional. I was trying to replace, besides those tears, get that instant gratification.
Yeah, it's to me, from what I see on a neural side, is just it's a dopamine addiction, like that. You want that short, fast burst of a dopamine response, and it's one of those things where I love how you said it, because this is what I usually tell people, and I work with people on this. Is I'll just tell them, if you have an addiction to something like that that's negative, flip it to something positive.
Yeah.
And my mother, she used to smoke, and when she stopped smoking, she found fitness. Mm-hmm. And that became her new addiction. And it's been her addiction for the whole entire life. And so it's one of those things where, just like anything else, a negative thought, flip it with a positive. Just change what the focus is, spin it a different way. And it's just looking at, for all the listeners out there, it's just, change the habit with something that's a little bit more on the positive side. And it isn't a dopamine addiction. Unfortunately, in today's world, our dopamine addictions are social media.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just how many likes, somebody's liked, some of this, who said this. And it's just check the phone, notifications, boom. And it's these short, fast bursts. And it was designed that way. It was designed to, how can we get someone hooked onto something and not be XYZ? So it's and unfortunately that's what the society we live in.
Right.
And it not fun, but it can change it. You can rewire it. Just again, habits create your rituals that you do every day is what creates your lifestyle. So it's one of those things.
Right. And just for your listeners too, if you guys are feeling that way about the social media thing, turn your notifications off. The only notifications I ever have come through on my phone is my text messages.
Love it. Yeah, it's as simple as that. And that's how I am too with mine. I don't have any, I can't stand notifications. It drives me nuts.
I will say though, Dr. Vic, your Instagram stories are getting really good.
So some people, I'm not mentioning names, have been saying because I have this thing against stories, but that's a whole other topic I'm not going to go into. But I appreciate you noticing and thank you.
Yes, they're getting out there. I like them.
It drives me nuts. I'm still trying to figure out a way. I told my wife because she's been doing it, and she's like, "Hey, you need to really step this up." And I was like, "You know what? I'm going to figure out how I can spend like 5 minutes, just knock them all out, and then I'm done, and I'm not doing anything else with this because I hate having my phone near me."
Right.
But I digress. So you got your podcast. You're doing Realigned Women and everything else with your programs. I love it. You have any programs coming up in the near future?
Yes. So my Realigned Women podcast is with my business partner and friend, Lori, who her and I actually met on social media 3-4 years ago through recovery. She is 5 years sober, and we have like the sister relationship. I love her dearly. So her and I created this recovery community membership. So it's a recovery membership for women only. Sorry, guys.
Come on now. Just kidding.
Yeah, there's a whole reason why her and I just did women, but so it's for women only recovery membership. And her and I have in there, we do 2 coaching calls a month. We have 1 guest speaker. We just had our guest speaker this month, and it was our mutual friend, Carly. She nailed it.
Love it.
A lot of trainings in there, but we are launching our first course in February, and it's an 8-week course called the Sober Sessions. I'm so excited for this.
I saw that. I was like, "Ooh, this looks good. I like it."
Yeah. So her and I are gonna. It's 8 weeks. So each week there's a different topic of your recovery path, from gaining new habits, new positive habits, creating morning routines, rituals, however you want to do that, processing through the grieving of your past life. So it's just really, there's a lot more in there. So it's going to be once a week. We're going to do a video, courses, all of that. I'm excited for this.
I'm excited for you. When's it starting?
That one's starting in February. And then each month too, I always have my health and fitness coaching that I do.
Awesome. I like that. That's good stuff. Yeah, grieving's interesting. I know when I started my spiritual journey, they always say the death of the ego emits the light of the light of the soul, and it's not that I've had an addiction on that level with alcohol or anything, but it was like a dying process, and that's the only way I could relate to that. But it's tough. I must say it is tough. Change old habits to create new.
But and don't you think that once something gets explained to you like that, it just clicks and you're like, oh, that's what that was?
I think eventually, yes. Yeah. I think eventually, yes. Yeah. Because I mean, like, I'm that type of way. As soon as it clicks, done, move, that's it. And I don't have to ever look back again.
Right.
But some people, their mind's going to come back. It's going to fight them. They're going to rationalize. Ego's going to come through. It's going to do all these different things to try to pull you back because your brain lives off past experiences.
Yes.
And its whole job which is a great program. I'm not saying it's not bad, because a lot of people in the spiritual realms would be like saying, the spiritual world would be saying like, ego's horrible. You got to get away from ego. You can't and I'm always like, you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for ego. We need it. Right. But it's not letting it dictate your life.
Right.
And so that's where the whole grieving process is just a change of identity, I think, in my opinion.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
I would. Totally.
Awesome. Anything else you want to share with the listeners before we wrap up this amazing episode?
Yeah, I just really want to share. And before I got on here, I got very emotional and I cried. And if you no, but this is in the good way, Dr.
That's what I meant it by. I meant it by that. Just FYI.
Because I want anyone out there who is listening to this, who is in active addiction with whatever. It doesn't have to be alcohol, but with whatever you're going through. I was somebody who was once, who used alcohol to suppress feelings, who did a bunch of cocaine, who eventually ended up smoking crack. Okay.
Gotcha.
Coming from the bottom to where I am now, I just want everyone to know that recovery is possible, but you have to believe in yourself and do not ever give up. Even if you relapse, get back in the game and keep going because your life is worth it.
I love that. That's powerful stuff there, and I couldn't agree with you more. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying thank you in my tears.
Made you cry a couple times there. I'm sorry.
You did. Our Oprah moment.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, no, it's so true. And just to commend listeners who are listening too, it's, I use a model that, sometimes you get knocked off track, but the key thing is not to get hung up on that. Just get back. Just keep going back.
And that's the thing. And it's like just from working with a bunch of women, like the relapse, if they relapse, they beat themselves up. And it's like at this point, it's like, what is the point of beating yourself up? You're just going to create yourself in that mindset and continue to spiral down. Like you can't ever forget the time you had before the relapse and the person that you still seek out to be. That's still possible for you.
Yeah. And I love how you said, just believe in yourself. I think that's the biggest thing. When it comes to anything in life is you have to just believe in yourself that it's possible.
Right. Because here I am 6 years later on your podcast.
Look at that.
You know what I mean? So it's in your own time and it's laid out for you, but you have to put in the work on yourself. And
look at what all you're creating and the lives you're touching and all that just from the choices you made.
Yes.
And that's where I always tell people, like, there's a blessing in everything. And we just have to, and this is kind of like my new book coming out in June, we'll be talking a lot about this, but there's a blessing in everything. And once you shift mindset to look at the blessing, all of a sudden you grab way more lessons and you see how it actually propelled you and was there for many reasons beyond what we can ever imagine.
Can I also say too that this is very fitting that the day that I do your podcast was this morning I finished your book.
Really?
Yes. I finished your book this morning. And then when I was done, I was like, this is very fitting that I finished his book and I'm doing his podcast today.
That is awesome. I hope you enjoyed the book, by the way.
I did. It's great.
Awesome. I appreciate that. So how can people get a hold of you?
You can email me at sobervibes@gmail.com. I have my Instagram account, Courtney Andersen. I have a Sober Vibes Instagram account, Real Aligned Women Instagram account. I know it's aggressive.
Wow, you're really out there. I'm learning from you here. Keep going. Yes,
it's a lot. But with the Real Aligned Women stuff, my business partner Lori and I do that one together. So you can find me on Facebook Sober Vibes. And then realalignedwomen.com, and you can gain access to our podcast there.
Awesome. And then you got the program in February, which I know is on your website.
Yeah, it's on the website. To sign up for that, you can sign up and join the waiting list. And this is the other thing, too, with this. We work with people, me and Lori and myself, I work with people who are still, again, in active addiction. So even if you're sober curious and want to see what the process is or what's going on and meet some people who are going through it, it's for all women.
Thank you for clarifying. I was going to ask you about that, but perfect. Yes. Well, Courtney, this was fun.
Thank you.
You have a really powerful story. I see a lot of books coming out from you in this journey. I've said it before to you, and I'm saying it again here live with all the listeners listening.
Thank you.
No pressure.
That's my plan for 2019. And I actually I switched over to another book title that came to me last night.
I love it. So yeah, I could definitely see you have a powerful story and the work you did to break out of that and get out of that pattern to where you are now is they should do a movie on it. Seriously. And I don't talk like this just to make it feel good. I'm not that type of person. So powerful story.
Thank you. Can I say too that for any of your listeners, I just completed Dr. Vic's 5-week course, and it was one of the best decisions I have done for myself. So I would strongly suggest it for anyone. And Dr. Vic, you are a blessing. And I said that to you in the group, and it's just you have impacted my life in such a powerful way, and I appreciate what you're doing.
You're almost getting me teary-eyed now.
You should put a disclaimer in this episode, like may cause crying.
I love it. No, I appreciate that. It's like you said, one story or one thing that could change someone's life makes it, all the better. And you've done your part for the, in this world. And so hearing that just reinforces that even more for me. So thank you, really.
You're welcome.
Well, this was exciting. I appreciate you. Appreciate all you're doing. And again, just thank you for being on, and keeping that fire, that flame burning bright.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Vic.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. For past shows, please visit www.empoweryourreality.com. I hope this show inspired you and added to your life to help you on the journey to rediscover who you really are. To connect with us on Facebook, please visit www.facebook.com/Dr. Vic Manzo. Check us out on Twitter. The handle is Dr. Vic21. Follow us on Instagram, www.instagram.com/Dr. Vic Manzo. If you were inspired by the podcast, pay it forward by sharing it with someone who you know can benefit from it. Thank you again for listening to the Mindful Experiment podcast, sharing paths to help you rediscover your infinite potential.